Hello and welcome to Anti-Doping Updates, Episode 2. My name is Mike Cook and this is my channel where we talk about the latest updates for anti-doping news in the worlds of international sport. A little bit about my background. I have a bachelor's degree from University of California, Berkeley, a law degree from Northwestern School of Law. I practice in the area of administrative law in the state of Oregon. I have competed in gymnastics in the NCAA and in CrossFit and weightlifting and triathlon and obstacle course racing. And I'm also an internationally certified gymnastics judge. On today's episode, we have 3 great stories to talk about, all with different aspects of anti-doping. First is Shayna Jack, the Australian swimmer. Second is Elijah Manangoi, a Kenyan middle distance runner. And third is Andrew Starykowicz, an American triathlete. Okay, so our first story is regarding Shayna Jack. Last week I told you a little bit about her case, and we only had the press release from the Court for Arbitration of Sport, and now we've got the full decision, so there's lots more to talk about. Shayna Jack is an Australian swimmer who was scheduled to compete in the 2019 World Championships, and at the training camp leading up to that, she tested positive for ligandrol in an out-of-competition test. She was pulled from the team, and that led to a lot of speculation. Sport Integrity Australia, which is the anti-doping authority for Australia, issued a 4-year disqualification notice on her, and Shayna appealed that decision to the Court for Arbitration of Sport, who performed the first instance hearing on that matter with a single arbitrator as the decision maker. So a little bit about the framework that the Court for Arbitration of Sport uses for these. There's three different types of decisions that can happen in an anti-doping violation case. The first is an intentional violation. If there's an intentional violation, that's a 4-year disqualification. If the individual can show that there is no fault or negligence and can establish how the prohibited substance got into his or her system, then there is a reduced sanction of possibly no sanction at all or a reprimand up to 2 years. If the individual can show that there is no significant fault or negligence and can also show how the prohibited substance got into her system, then there is a 2-year sanction, which also can possibly be reduced based on the individual's level of fault. But in both of those, no fault or negligence or no significant fault or negligence, the individual must show how the prohibited substance got into his or her system. And in the past, the Court for Arbitration of Sport has viewed the intentional violation cases as a very small window of opportunity for the individual, because it's easy for the athlete to show, to just deny using the prohibited substance. So in Shayna Jack's case, she argued that there are 3 possible ways that the ligandrol could have entered her system. One is that one of her supplements that she was taking was contaminated. Secondly, she argued that perhaps she came into contact with ligandrol from the blender that she used that was also used by her brothers and her partner. And third, she argued that it's possible that she came into contact with the ligandrol from swimming in a swimming pool. The Court for Arbitration of Sport found that based on those theories were just speculation, and she didn't have any scientific proof as to proving that the ligandrol entered a system via any of those methods. Now, usually in that sort of case, the court would argue that since you haven't proven how the substance got into your system, that's an intentional violation. However, the Court for Arbitration of Sport looked at this case a little differently and said that, well, it's since Shayna hasn't shown how the prohibited substance got into her system, the Sport Integrity Australia would have the burden to show that it was an intentional violation. So shifting the burden to the Anti-Doping Association. And since the Anti-Doping Association wasn't able to prove that she intentionally took ligandrol, they found that it was an unintentional violation and only a 2-year sanction rather than the default sanction of 4 years. So that's how Shayna Jack was able to go from a 4-year disqualification to a 2-year disqualification. Now again, this is the first instance hearing the Court for Arbitration of Sport held on behalf of Sport Integrity Australia. So WADA has the opportunity to appeal that decision to a full panel at the Court for Arbitration of Sport. We'll see if they do that or not, or if they let the reduced 2-year sanction take effect. Second case to talk about is Elijah Manangoi. He is a middle distance runner from Kenya who was the world champion in 2017 in the 1500 meters. And he was sanctioned by the Athletic Integrity Unit, which is the disciplinary unit for World Athletics, with a 2-year sanction for whereabouts filings. As an athlete in a registered testing pool, Elijah was required to submit whereabouts filings each quarter. And in those whereabouts filings, you are supposed to indicate a 60-minute period each day where you can be contacted at for drug testing, for out-of-competition testing. And if you're not at your location, that's a whereabouts filing failure or a missed test, and 3 whereabouts filing failures or missed test in a 12-month period is a 2-year sanction, which may be reduced based on finding of no negligence. So that's the issue. So Elijah Manangoi, his first missed test was on July 3, 2019. He indicated that he was going to be at the Manangoi University in Manangoi, Kenya from 0800 to 0900. In his explanation to the Athletics Integrity Unit, he indicated that he was returning home from San Francisco and landed at 2300 in Nairobi, Kenya the night before, but his luggage wasn't there when he got into the airport, and his key for his house was in his luggage. And so rather than returning home, he stayed at an airport hotel and didn't get back to his home until later the following day. And he didn't update his whereabouts filings because by the time he figured that out, it was past midnight and too late to change his whereabouts filings. The Athletics Integrity Unit found that still constituted a whereabouts filing, and therefore, they found that he couldn't show that there was no negligence for that filing failure. The second one was a missed test on November 12th. He again indicated he would be at the Manangoi University in Manangoi, Kenya from 0500 to 0600, but explained that he missed his test because he was returning home from his duties with the Kenyan Police Authority and got stuck in traffic. And again, the Athletics Integrity Unit found that constituted a missed test, and he did not show that there was no negligence for that. The third missed test is a little more interesting. That was on December 22nd. Again, he indicated he'd be at Manangoi University from 0500 to 0600. But in this case, he was traveling back from Austria to receive medical treatment from an injury. And after flying through Munich and through Dubai, he didn't arrive into his home on December 22nd at 14:35, well after his missed test. His explanation for this one was that he had delegated his whereabouts filings to a third party, and some athletes do that. They have a person do their whereabouts filings for them rather than do it themselves, and the person who did it just made a mistake. He didn't indicated the wrong day that he'd be returning home, and so he totally missed the test then. And the Athletics Integrity Unit found that again, Mr. Manangoi was negligent because he didn't double check the filings from the third person, and you can't delegate away your responsibility to accurately make your whereabouts filings. So based on that, the Athletics Integrity Unit found that there were 3 filing failures in a 12-month period of time, and found that Mr. Manangoi was negligent in all 3 of them, and therefore no reduction in the sanction, 2-year sanction for him. The third case to talk about is Andrew Starykowicz, who is an American triathlete. And this is about a therapeutic use exemption, so this is a completely different issue we're talking about. Andrew had qualified for the 2019 World Ironman Triathlon in Hawaii, and just days before the race was scheduled to start, he came down with a viral bronchial infection, went to the hospital, and was prescribed 2 types of inhalers. One was called a Brio inhaler, and the other is called a Medrol inhaler, and one of them contained vilanterol, which is a prohibited substance at all times. So he scratched out of the Ironman competition in Hawaii, returned home, and then knowing that his inhalers contained prohibited substance, he applied for a therapeutic use exemption. And the U.S. Anti-Doping Association, USADA, was the one that was responsible for making the decision on that, and they denied his request for the therapeutic use exemption. So that was in November. In December, Andrew decided to compete in a different Ironman triathlon in Florida, all the while still wanting to appeal the decision on the therapeutic use exemption. USADA requested an explanation from his doctor, and his doctor provided an explanation about why the inhalers were necessary for him and what condition it was for. And again, USADA denied it. Andrew requested review from WADA, and WADA also denied that request. And so Andrew appealed that decision to the Court for Arbitration of Sport. So the decision that the Court for Arbitration of Sport was reviewing was the therapeutic use exemption, not the, so at his competition in Florida, he tested positive for vilanterol. So the Court for Arbitration of Sport was only deciding on the therapeutic use exemption. And the issue, as the Court for Arbitration of Sport framed it, was whether the prohibited substance was needed to treat an acute medical condition such that the athlete would experience a significant impairment to health if the prohibited substance were withheld and there's no reasonable therapeutic alternative. And the Court for Arbitration of Sport concluded that Andrew had shown that the prohibited substance was needed to treat an acute medical condition. he had shown that he would experience a significant impairment to health if the prohibited substance were withheld. But the Court for Arbitration of Sport agreed with USADA that Andrew had not shown that there was no reasonable therapeutic alternative, and found that there were other reasonable therapeutic alternatives that didn't contain this prohibited substance, namely Advair, Symbicort, and Foradil. And so the Court for Arbitration of Sport maintained the denial of the therapeutic use exemption. Now, there's no penalty for a denial for requesting a therapeutic use exemption and having that denied. However, Andrew Starykowicz still has hanging over his head the positive test for Vilantrol at the triathlon that he competed in Florida. That decision hasn't come down yet. Presumably it'll be an intentional violation, perhaps a 4-year ban for him. So that's it for the updates for this show. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or what you think about it. Do you think the Court for Arbitration of Sport was too harsh or too severe in their analysis on these cases? I'd like to hear your opinions. Thanks. See you next time.